this video, we're going to go over some troubleshooting tips for the Tippmann 98 Custom Platinum Series. These troubleshooting tips are going to be over markers that have firing issues. Now, these firing issues may include, the gun doesn't want to recock, it stutters or fires full auto, or it just might not fire when you pull the trigger. This particular marker has an issue with it, a firing issue. It just simply doesn't want to fire when you pull the trigger. The bolt moves forward, you can hear it click, but it just doesn't fire. And I'll kind of demonstrate that for you real quick. Now, as you can see, something's just not right. That bolt doesn't want to go all the way forward, and you're not, hearing the shot. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead, we'll remove our air source, and we'll kind of look a little further into the gun. Now, I just kind of want to go over real quick some of the most common things that would cause a firing issue with the Tippmann 98 Custom Platinum. One of the most common ones that we run into is just simply that the tank that they're using doesn't have any air in it. It's one of the most common things that we run into, a low air source. A low air source, obviously your gun's not going to fire. You're not going to be able to shoot paintballs. So that's one of the most common ones. Always check your air source first. Before you even think that there's anything wrong with the gun, make sure you have a full tank. And make sure that that tank works. If you don't have a tank or you think that there's something wrong with your tank, see if you can borrow one from a friend or maybe even a local paintball store or a local field. Always check your tank first. Another real common problem that we run into is once the gun's disassembled, a lot of people put the ball latch in backwards, which I just, for some odd reason, I have a gut feeling that this particular gun has that problem. I mean, you can just kind of notice it, that the gun doesn't fire at all. So we'll go ahead, I'll first start off by removing the barrel, and we'll go ahead, we'll take the receiver off too, and I'll first start off by kind of loosening this gas line a little bit, and we'll remove our receiver half here. Go ahead and set our receiver half off to the side. I'll go ahead and remove our sear spring, and we'll go ahead and take our other left receiver half off. Okay. And our ball latch did look like it was backwards. Whenever you take apart the marker, if you see that the ball latch looks like this is actually the wrong way, and that's going to totally bring that bolt to a stop. And I'll kind of show you what happens here. You have your ball latch in backwards, and with your barrel attached, what happens is your front bolt hits that ball latch and smashes it into the barrel, and your bolt comes to a complete stop. So that's more than likely what's going on here, and we'll just go ahead and make sure that we get that flipped the right direction. So we'll go ahead and get that put in the correct way. And if you look at that ball latch, the open end of it should be facing towards the barrel, and when the bolt clears it, it'll actually push the ramp down. So that's the way that the ball latch should be facing. So we'll go ahead, we'll kind of cover some other things that can cause some issues with firing. Oversized O-rings, or just not having the right O-rings in the gun will also cause that problem. If you have a front bolt O-ring that's damaged, or it's kind of hanging off loosely, or it's swollen, that'll also cause the same effect as like your ball latch being backwards. You'll go to pull the trigger, the bolt will kind of come to a dead stop, and that's because that O-ring's damaged, or it's just really loose. Same thing with your rear bolt O-ring back here. If it's really loose on the rear bolt, or it's swollen, and usually a swollen O-ring is usually due to using some other kind of lubricant other than what Tippmann puts in their accessory packs or in their guns. That tends to swell O-rings. Most of the oils and lubricants, they have some kind of solvent, so you want to try to stay away from any kind of those lubricants, WD-40, 3-in-1 oil, stuff like that. Another thing could be a crack in the power tube. If you get a crack in this power tube, you'll lose a lot of the blowback air, so it won't push the bolt all the way back to recock. So we'll go ahead, we'll put our receiver half on. We're kind of finished up with this first section here. And I'll kind of go over another thing. You know, if you have a firing issue to where the gun's just constantly firing after you let go of the trigger, it's just firing a full auto effect, that could be due to two different things. It could be that you are missing your sear spring and the sear is just sitting downward like that and the bolt is just fluttering, and you're just getting a continued full auto effect because, you know, your bolt's not catching the sear. You know, real common problem. A lot of people, they'll put this spring in, and as they're putting the receiver half back down, the spring pops out while they're putting the receiver half back down, and they just didn't see it. So they think that they have the spring in there, but the case is it popped out as they were putting the receiver down. So always, you know, double check. You know, try to keep that spring in there secured while you're putting your receiver half down. Another thing too, and wait a minute, before I even put that back in, I'll kind of show you the sear. You have your sear, and you kind of have that right angle. That's where it catches on the underside of the bolt. If you start to see that your sear is rounding right there at the corner, along with your rear bolt, because the rear bolt has that same edge on the underside. If it looks like it's rounding, then that'll, you know, cause a lot of problems too. You know, they just won't catch each other, and when they don't catch, you'll get that same full auto effect. Another thing you always want to check to make sure you have your guide pin in place. You know, the guide pin obviously goes into the drive spring, and that's what guides the spring straight into the bolt. So if you don't have that in place, your spring will bunch up, and sometimes your gun won't recock. So those are just some of the basic things that can cause your gun to either stutter or not want to recock or just shoot properly. One last thing that I want to touch before we actually put the receiver hat back on is say you go to pull the trigger and you get a dead trigger pull. That could be that you have, you know, either of these two springs flip-flopped, or, you know, your trigger return slide, maybe it has a burr on the top side of it, and your trigger return slide is actually this metal bracket. Well, the sear comes over top of that, and if you have a burr there, the sear won't actually clear the top of it, so you'll pull the trigger and nothing will happen, the gun won't fire. One real easy way of, you know, remedying that is just taking a file, just taking 1 or 2 passes just to kind of clean off that edge, and that'll allow the sear to actually clear the top part of the trigger. So we'll go ahead, we'll put our trigger spring back in, our trigger back in, kind of check everything. You know, make sure that your marker's well lubricated. You know, you always want to make sure that the, you know, Tippmann guns are always well lubricated. That's usually another thing. A lot of people, they forget to maintain their gun, they forget to lubricate it, and obviously that'll cause some firing issues with, you know, as well. And put our barrel back on. And we'll tighten up our gas line. And as you can see, our bolt seems to be moving correctly. Just give it a real quick test. And that seemed to fix our firing issue. And that is how you properly diagnose a firing issue with the Tippmann 98 Custom Platinum Series.